Once upon a time, in the bustling city of Lagos, lived a young couple who just welcomed their very first child. The husband, David, was a serial cheat who had several women at his disposal. He spent years playing games with women, lying, deceiving, and breaking hearts until he finally met his wife, Daisy, a kind and gentle woman who loved him with all of her heart. At first, Daisy believed that love could change David. She prayed for him, trusted him, and built her world around their marriage. But the truth was that David was the kind of man who believed that every woman was just like him, unfaithful and deceptive. He loved the thrill of the chase, the power of manipulation, and the attention that came with being desired. He could look at Daisy in the eyes and say, "I love you, darling," whilst texting another woman under the table. Even after marriage, David did not stop. He had a way of masking his sins with affection. Every time Daisy suspected something, he'd buy her a new dress or take her out to dinner whispering, "You worry too much, my love." But Daisy was not blind. One evening, while David claimed to be working late at the office, Daisy's phone buzzed with a message from her friend Chinyere, who worked in the same building. "Your husband is not at work." The message read, "He's at the Velvet Lounge with a woman, and they are holding hands." Daisy's heart sank. She grabbed her shawl and took a cab straight to the lounge. From the entrance, she saw him, laughing loudly, his arm around a light-skinned lady in a short red dress. The woman giggled and fed him a spoonful of cake. Daisy froze. Her eyes welled up with tears, but she walked up to their table and began to speak. "David!" she said softly. David's smile vanished. The woman dropped the spoon, startled. "What are you doing here?" he snapped, his tone sharp, his face suddenly cold. "I should be asking you that," she replied, her voice shaking. "You said you are working late." David stood up abruptly. "Daisy, this isn't what you think. Don't embarrass me here." "Embarrass you?" she whispered, trembling. "David, I am your wife." But David did not care. He grabbed her hand tightly and dragged her outside. "You don't ever come to my meetings again. Do you hear me?" he barked. That night, Daisy cried until her eyes swelled shut. But by morning, David had returned with flowers and crocodile tears. "I'm sorry, Daisy. She means nothing. You know you're my wife, right?" She wanted to believe him. She always did. But the lies continued. A few months later, Daisy returned home early from the market and heard strange noises coming from their bedroom. She froze, heart pounding, as she pushed the door slightly open. There was David in their matrimonial bed with another woman. The world seemed to stop. "David!" she screamed again. He jumped up, shocked and naked, while the woman scrambled for her clothes. "Get out!" Daisy shouted. "Both of you, get out of my house!" But David, instead of apologizing, looked at her with contempt. "You should be grateful I even married you," he hissed. "Do you think you're the only woman who wants me?" That sentence broke something inside of her. From that day, Daisy stopped arguing. She stopped begging. She simply prayed, silently, endlessly, for God to change her husband. She still cooked for him, still washed his clothes, still smiled through her tears, but deep inside, she was breaking piece by piece. David continued his double life, a husband by day, a womanizer by night. He would lie effortlessly, telling Daisy that he had business trips, when in reality, he was vacationing with his mistresses. So when Daisy fell pregnant after one intimate night with her husband, David's mind began to twist with doubt. "How can one night make you pregnant?" he sneered one morning as Daisy prepared his breakfast. "You must think I'm a fool," he said to Daisy, who froze as the spoon slipped from her hand. "David, what are you saying? You are my husband. I've never looked at another man in my life," she said to David, who scoffed and began to speak. "You think I'll just believe that? I know your type. You men can act innocent, but you're all the same," he said to Daisy, who stood there shocked as she watched him walk away. The words cut deep into her heart like a knife. The days that followed were filled with silent wars. Davy's distrust turned into open resentment. Every time she smiled, he accused her of pretending. Every time she cried, he said she was acting. He began to stay out late, returning home in the early hours of the morning, reeking of the perfume of another woman. One evening, as Adaeze set his dinner on the table, David walked in wearing a wrinkled shirt with lipstick stains on the collar. "David," she said gently, "where are you coming from? I've been so worried." Before she could finish, he slammed his hand on the table. "Don't you start your nonsense, Adaeze. I'm tired of your nagging." "I wasn't nagging," she said softly, clutching her pregnant belly. "I just wanted to know where you have been." "You just what?" he snapped. "You think because you're pregnant, you can start acting like my mother? Let me warn you, Adaeze. If you don't stop monitoring me, I'll stop coming home altogether." Her eyes filled with tears as she began to speak. "David, I'm not your enemy. I'm carrying your child." He smirked and looked at her. "My child?" He laughed bitterly as he walked out on her. Adaeze felt a sharp pain in her chest. The man she once loved had turned into the monster that she could not recognize. Weeks passed and David's cruelty began to grow worse. He would go clubbing with his friends, while Adaeze sat alone at home, eating dinner cold and crying silently. Sometimes he wouldn't return until morning, and when she tried to ask where he had been, he would throw the question back at her. "Why are you so desperate to know, Adaeze? Are you guilty of something yourself?" One night, Adaeze woke up to the sound of his phone vibrating beside her. She picked it up and saw a message from a woman named Linda. "I can't stop thinking about last night, baby. You're amazing. When are we meeting again?" Her heart sank. She stared at the message for a very long time before placing the phone back quietly. She didn't want to fight again, but her silence did not save her. The next morning, David stormed into the room, phone in hand. "You touched my phone?" he shouted. "I only picked it up when it rang," she stammered. "Don't lie to me. You went through my messages." Adaeze bit her lip as tears rolled down her cheeks. "David, what are you hiding from me?" "Nothing," he barked. "But you wouldn't understand even if I told you. You're too busy pretending to be a saint." He turned away, grabbing his car keys. "You disgust me sometimes," he said to her as he walked away. And with that, he left, leaving her standing there, holding her belly and crying. As her pregnancy advanced, David became more distant. He no longer attended her antenatal appointments. When she asked him to accompany her once, he waved her off. "Can't you see I'm busy, Adaeze? Or is it that you want everyone in the hospital to see me and think that I'm the fool raising another man's child?" Adaeze gasped. "David, why would you say that?" He sneered. "Because that's what I believe." From that day, Adaeze stopped asking him for help. She went to the hospital alone, clutching her fowl, watching other women with their loving husbands, wondering what she had done wrong in life. David barely spoke to her. He stopped touching her, stopped smiling, stopped caring, and when their baby boy finally arrived, small, beautiful and perfect, Adaeze thought the sight of his son would soften his heart, but instead, David grew colder. He never came to the hospital to see them, not even for once. Whilst other new mothers were surrounded by flowers, gifts and loving family members, Adaeze sat alone in her hospital bed, her newborn son lying beside her in a small cot. The room was quiet, except for the faint hum of the ceiling fan and the soft rhythmic breathing of her baby. Each time a nurse entered to check on her, Adaeze forced a weak smile, hoping they wouldn't see the pain in her eyes. But when night came and the world grew silent, she couldn't hold it any longer. She would sit up, clutching her baby to her chest, rocking him gently as tears streamed down her face. "My son," she whispered through trembling lips. "I don't know what your father sees when he looks at us, but I see light. You are all I have now. I promise, no matter what happens, I will never leave you. I will be your father, your mother, You're everything." Her tears soaked the tiny blanket wrapped around the baby, but she kept whispering, praying that somehow her voice would reach heaven. David never called, not even for once. The hospital staff pitied her quietly. Some whispered that her husband must be abroad. Others said that he had abandoned her, but only one person truly showed her kindness: a young nurse named Nkiru. Nkiru was soft-spoken but firm, with kind eyes that carried warmth. Every night, she would sneak into her Daisy's room after her shift and sit beside her. She would hold the baby, rock him gently and whisper, "You're doing well, Mama. You're stronger than you think." Sometimes, she would bring Daisy food from the staff kitchen or hot water to bath, even when she wasn't assigned to her ward. One night, Daisy broke down completely. "Nkiru," she sobbed, "I don't know what I did wrong. I loved him. I prayed for him. I gave him everything. Why does he hate me so much?" Nkiru placed a hand on her shoulder. "Because he doesn't know what love is," she said softly. "But you do, and that's why God will not leave you empty-handed. You will see, one day, you will smile again, and it will be real." Those words stuck with Daisy like a seed buried deep in her heart. She was discharged a week later as she returned home to an empty house. David was nowhere to be found, and his numbers were not connecting. For a moment, Daisy was worried that something could have happened to him, but David returned home hours later with a brown envelope, his expression dark and furious. He slammed the envelope on the table, revealing that he carried out a DNA test on the child. Daisy blinked in confusion as she asked why he would do such a thing. "A DNA test? Why, David? What for?" His voice thundered through the room. "To know the truth. And now I do. That child we are carrying is not mine." Daisy's world stopped. Her lips trembled as she told David that it was impossible. "He's your son. I swear before God," she said to David, who was not willing to listen. Before she could finish, David grabbed her arm roughly and commanded her that she leave his house. He called her unprintable names and pushed her out of his house, not caring that she was carrying a newborn baby. Daisy was still healing from the surgery, but David did not care. He treated her like an abomination, despite sleeping with several women during their marriage. Whilst Daisy waited for him to return from work, David spent his time at hotels with women who were only after his money. In fact, he was meeting up with one of his mistresses that night, despite pushing his wife out with a newborn baby. With shaking hands, Daisy wrapped her newborn in a thin shawl as she stepped out into the night, tears pouring down her eyes as she wondered where she would go from there. Daisy walked through the streets, looking for where to sleep. She even begged strangers to house her, but no one was willing to help a strange woman who was out on the streets with a baby. Daisy watched as her baby cried relentlessly. She held him tight to her chest as she made her way to the popular bridge in the city. Daisy slept under the bridge that night with her son. She got up early and made her way on foot to her uncle's house, which was almost 3 hours' walk. She arrived at his house exhausted as she pleaded for him to help her, but her uncle refused, saying that he had no space in his house for her. Daisy could not believe her ears. The house her uncle lived belonged to her late father. Her uncle took all the properties from her because she was a woman. Daisy thought that having a child in her arms would make her uncle have compassion towards her, seeing that his wife had been unable to have a child for over 20 years. However, she was wrong, as her uncle not only shut the door to her face, he even went further to threaten her that the next time that she set her foot in his compound would be the last time that she would ever do so. Daisy stood there broken as she pondered on what next to do. With nowhere else to go, she went to her mother-in-law's house in hopes of mercy. "Mama, please," she pleaded. "David sent me away. I just need a place to rest with the baby." But David's mother hissed and began to yell angrily at her. "So you finally brought your bastard child here? You think I'll raise another man's blood under my roof? God forbid," she said to Daisy, who tried to convince her that the child was for her husband David. Her sister-in-law Nkechi joined in as she began to rain insults at her. "Shameless woman! You thought you could trap my brother with another man's child? How low can you go? You prostitute!" she said to Adaeze, who turned away in tears. By nightfall, Adaeze found herself back at the bridge, her baby wrapped tightly against her chest. She laid an old wrapper on the ground, shielding her child from the cold wind. For days, she begged on the street. Rain poured, sun burned, and she endured it all. Her only focus was keeping her baby safe and alive. One afternoon, while walking by a busy road, Adaeze noticed a man in a designer suit talking on his phone. He was about to cross the road without looking. A speeding truck was approaching, and Adaeze knew that if she didn't act fast, something terrible would happen to him. So she screamed and ran forward. Adaeze grabbed his arm just in time as the truck zoomed past, missing him by a few inches. The young man froze, his heart pounding in his chest as he turned to see a woman holding a baby and panting heavily. "Are you okay?" he asked, as Adaeze replied him saying that she should be the one asking if he was okay. The concern in her voice touched something deep within his heart as he offered to buy her lunch for saving his life. Adaeze watched as an SUV pulled up next to them. It drove them to a 5-star restaurant, one of the best restaurants in the state. Adaeze felt so out of place, but the man, whose name was Olumide Johnson, did everything to make her feel comfortable. In fact, people would have guessed that they were a couple because of how nicely he treated her. They sat at the restaurant as Olumide asked to know her story, and Adaeze narrated everything to him. How her husband accused her of cheating and threw her out of his house like trash. Adaeze narrated how she had been sleeping under the bridge, how she could barely provide for her baby, who was only a few weeks old. Olumide sat there and watched as Adaeze devoured her food like a hungry lion. He offered to provide her shelter, food, and anything that she would ever need for her baby and herself, and Adaeze could not contain her joy. Olumide took her home with him. They arrived at his grand mansion, and Adaeze could not believe her eyes. The house was so huge that Adaeze opened her mouth in shock when Olumide showed her to her room. He provided her with clothes, shoes, and everything she ever needed for her baby. Olumide even went further to send her to the best pediatrician in the state who examined the child. Adaeze could not believe how her life transformed. He offered her a job at his company, and for the first time in her life, Adaeze began to believe in herself. She blossomed, and her confidence returned in a way that she never knew possible. Olumide gave her a platform to shine, unlike her ex-husband David, who called her useless at every turn. Olumide watched her transform into a completely different woman. He admired her strength, her humility, her faith, and slowly, love began to grow between them. Within 2 years, Olumide asked her to be his wife. "I know what life took from you," he said, kneeling with a diamond ring in his hand. "But let me give you back everything that you deserve," he said to Adaeze, who cried tears of joy as she accepted to be his wife. They got married in a quiet ceremony, attended by dignitaries who would not stop whispering about how lucky Adaeze was. Many wondered what kind of woman could capture the heart of Olumide Johnson, one of the wealthiest and most respected businessmen in Lagos. But those who truly knew him understood that Olumide did not fall in love with her beauty. He fell in love with her spirit. Adaeze became a new woman. She now dressed with elegance, spoke with confidence, and carried herself with the quiet grace of someone who had been through fire and come out refined like gold. Her son Daniel grew up healthy and bright, with the kind of joy that only comes from a home filled with love. Years passed, and Adaeze became the managing director of one of Olumide's companies. Together, they built an empire, but more importantly, they built peace. One sunny afternoon, Adaeze went to Daniel's school to pick him up. As she stepped out of her Range Rover, wearing a white suit and gold heels, she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Adaeze," the voice said, as she turned abruptly and caught sight of her ex-husband David, who looked nothing like the man that she once knew. His once confident smile was gone, replaced with tired eyes that she could not recognize. His shirt was creased, his tie loose, and there was something broken about him. David stared at her in disbelief as he began to speak. Daisy, is that really you? He said softly as his voice cracked. Good afternoon, David, Daisy said as she waited for her son. But before she could walk away, his eyes fell on the little boy running towards her. Mommy! Mommy! Daniel called, wrapping his arms around her legs. David's heart stopped. The boy looked exactly like him. Same eyes, same smile, same dimple. His breath caught in his throat. That's your son? He stammered. Yes, Daisy replied quietly, placing a hand on Daniel's shoulder. David's lips trembled. He looks like me, he said, but Daisy said nothing. She smiled faintly, took her son's hand and walked towards her car. But David could not move. The image of that little boy haunted him all night. He could not sleep. He could not eat. His mind screamed that something was not right. Days later, he began following Daisy from her office to her home, until one day he saw her drive into a massive mansion with high golden gates. When the security men opened the gate, the sign on the wall caught his eye. The Olumide Johnson residence. David's legs went weak. He realized in that moment that the same man he had been trying to meet for months, the billionaire behind the contract that could save his failing business, was Daisy's husband. Fate, it seemed, had come full circle. Desperate to confirm what his heart feared, David went to the hospital and requested to see the doctor that carried out the tests years ago. He explained everything to him, and the doctor advised him to take a certain test, which revealed that David had two DNAs and Daniel was indeed his son. The doctor explained to him that he was a twin who absorbed his other twin in the womb, which means that he carries two sets of DNA. The first test must have used your secondary DNA. It happens rarely, but it explains the mismatch. David's hands trembled. You mean I threw my son and wife into the street for nothing? The doctor sighed as he apologized to him for all that had happened. Tears streamed down David's face as he staggered out of the hospital. Every cruel word he had said to Daisy echoed in his mind. Every night she cried, every insult, every cold shoulder. It all came crushing back. He rushed to her mansion, pleading with the guards to let him in. Please, tell her David is here. I need just 5 minutes. Please. When Daisy heard who it was, she stood by her window and looked down at him from the balcony. The same man who once called her useless now stood at her gate begging. Daisy came down to meet with him as David began to apologize for all that he did to her. Daisy, I'm sorry. I was wrong. Please forgive me. I found out the truth. The boy, Daniel, is my son. I was blind. I was foolish. Please, I beg you, forgive me. I went to the hospital and the doctors revealed to me that I have two sets of DNA. That was why the test results showed that I wasn't Daniel's father. Please forgive me, he said to Daisy, who raised her hand to stop him. Her voice calm and steady as she began to speak. David, you sent us out like trash. You accused me of being a prostitute whilst you went around sleeping with anything in skirt. David, you sent your own blood to sleep under the bridge whilst you slept comfortably in your house. You don't need to beg me because I have forgiven you long time ago, not for your sake, but for mine. Tears filled his eyes as he began to plead with her to let him see his son, even if it's once. Daisy looked him straight in the eyes and revealed that her son already has a father, a kind man who loves without conditions, the kind of man that he could never be. David fell to his knees sobbing. Please, I lost everything. My business, my peace, my life. Please, don't let me lose my son too, he said to Daisy, whose eyes softened. You didn't lose him, David. You threw him away like he meant nothing. But God decided to pick us up and gave us a new life. David's lips trembled as he began to plead. Please, Daisy, don't shut me out. Just one chance to tell him how sorry I am. Before Daisy could respond, a deep voice came from behind. That won't be necessary. It was Olumide, her husband. His expression was calm but firm. Mr. David, he said, stepping forward. I know who you are. I know what you did to my wife, and I know the pain you caused her. The forgiveness you seek does not always come with restoration. Sometimes, when we lose something precious, God gives it to someone who will cherish it better. David swallowed hard, unable to meet his gaze. In that moment, little Daniel came running towards them with a toy car in his hand. Mommy! Daddy! Look at my new car! He said excitedly as David turned sharply. His eyes filled with tears as he saw his own son call another man father. David buried his face in his hand as tears poured down his eyes. He knew in that moment that being a father takes more than blood. It takes love, presence, and sacrifice. Things that he never did for his son for all these years. Now, seeing how happy his son looked, David decided not to disrupt his happiness. Instead, he thanked Olumide for taking his son as his own. He then apologized to Adaeze for all that he did to her as he made his way out of their mansion. Adaeze stood there quietly as she watched him go. She never believed that a day like this would ever come, a day when the truth would finally come to light. David returned home sad to realize what he had lost. He learned his lessons the hard way, not to let pride and distrust destroy what love has built. The lesson to be learned from this story is that trust is the foundation of love, and once it breaks, everything else crumbles. Never make permanent decisions based on temporary emotions. A wise man protects his home, whilst a foolish one destroys it with his own hands. Always value the people who stand by you when life gets hard, because once they walk away, no amount of regret can bring them back. I hope you enjoyed the story.